Bullies laughed at the janitor's granddaughter, then she spoke, and the judges froze. The gymnasium buzzed with excitement, its walls lined with colorful banners and hopeful families gathered for the statewide middle school speech competition. Teachers rushed about in neatly pressed suits, adjusting microphones and calming nerves. In the middle of it all stood a quiet girl in a faded dress, her shoes a size too big, her hair neatly combed but plainly tied back. Her name was Lila Ortiz, and she was known to most only as the janitor's granddaughter. At 12 years old, Lila had learned more about shame than most grown-ups. Her grandfather, Mr. Ortiz, had worked at Jefferson Middle School for 22 years, scrubbing gum off desks and mopping floors long after the halls had emptied. He'd raised Lila by himself since she was 3, when her parents passed in a tragic car accident. Despite their struggles, he poured all the love he had into her. He taught her that dignity wasn't in wealth, but in how one treated others. But middle school had been cruel. Kids with perfect lunchboxes and brand-name backpacks would whisper behind her back. They mocked her hand-me-down clothes and how her grandpa pushed his mop bucket down the hall. Lila tried to ignore them. She'd learned to disappear, until the day her English teacher, Mrs. Pearson, caught her reciting poetry under her breath while cleaning up after class. "You have a voice that can move people," Mrs. Pearson said, handing Lila a flyer. "You should enter the speech competition." Lila hesitated. "But no one wants to hear from the janitor's granddaughter." Mrs. Pearson smiled. "Exactly why they need to." So, Lila spent weeks crafting her speech. She'd stay late in the classroom while her grandpa worked, scribbling ideas and rehearsing out loud to rows of empty desks. Her grandfather would peek in quietly, his eyes misty with pride as he listened. But not everyone was cheering her on. The morning of the competition, as Lila sat backstage gripping her note cards, she heard them, the same girls who always rolled their eyes when she walked by. "She's actually going up there," one sneered. "I heard she lives in a storage closet." "What's she gonna talk about, how to clean a toilet?" another laughed. Lila lowered her head, her cheeks burning. Her hands shook. For a moment, she thought about walking out the back door, slipping away before she embarrassed herself. Then she felt a warm, calloused hand on her shoulder. "Lila," her grandfather said, kneeling beside her, "you don't let the world tell you who you are. You show them. Speak your truth, Mija. That's something they can never take from you." When it was her turn, Lila walked to the podium slowly. The laughter from backstage still echoed in her ears. The auditorium quieted, more from curiosity than respect. She stood there in silence for a few seconds, gripping the edge of the podium, her note cards trembling in her hands. Then she looked up. "My name is Lila Ortiz," she began, her voice steady but soft. "Some of you know me as the janitor's granddaughter. That's true. And it's one of the greatest honors of my life." There was a murmur in the crowd. "I've heard what people say about him, and about me. That we don't belong. That we're invisible. That being poor means you're worth less. But I want to tell you about the richest man I know. He doesn't wear suits or drive a fancy car. He wears overalls that smell like pine sol and drives an old pickup that rattles in the winter." Lila paused, scanning the crowd. For the first time, people were leaning forward. "He taught me that worth isn't in what you own, it's in what you give. Every day, he gives dignity to a job most people look away from. He taught me that even if the world looks down on you, you can still lift others up." Silence swept the room. Last winter, a teacher slipped on the ice in the parking lot. My grandpa was the one who stayed with her, wrapped his coat around her, and called for help. No one thanked him. They never do. But he didn't expect it. Because his kindness doesn't come from wanting attention, it comes from being human. Her voice grew stronger now, fueled by something deeper. "I used to be ashamed. Ashamed of my old clothes, of my broken shoes, of where I came from. But I'm not anymore. Because when I look at my grandfather, I don't see a janitor. I see a man who raised a little girl to believe her voice mattered, even when the world told her it didn't. One of the judges leaned forward, visibly moved. I'm here today not to impress you, but to remind you. There are people like my grandfather everywhere. Quiet heroes. People who hold the world together while others rush past them. Don't judge them by their uniforms. Don't laugh at their children. Because if you did, if you really knew what they carried, you wouldn't laugh. You'd listen. Her last words rang out clear and bold. I am the janitor's granddaughter. And I am proud. The gymnasium stood still. No clapping. No whispering. Just silence. And then, the first judge rose. A slow, deliberate stand, followed by another, and another. Applause thundered through the room, erupting into a standing ovation. Even the students who had mocked her couldn't hide their awe. Backstage, the bullies stared, dumbfounded. The same girl they laughed at had just made the judges cry. Later that evening, as the sun began to dip behind the school building, Lila stood next to her grandfather, holding a golden plaque that read, First Place, Outstanding Speech Performance. She looked up at him, her eyes full of tears. I did it, Grandpa. He brushed a tear from her cheek. No, we did it. That night, Jefferson Middle School changed. Not because a girl won a trophy, but because she shattered a lie that had lived in those halls for years, that kindness comes with a price tag. Lila reminded them that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it speaks in a quiet voice, and everyone stops to listen. And the bullies? Well, they never laughed at her again. Because sometimes, all it takes is one brave voice to make a world remember its heart. Moral of the story. True worth isn't measured by wealth or titles, but by kindness, courage, and the strength to stand tall in a world that tries to make you small.